Hey everybody, you're watching Broke Rednecks Prepping. I'm Matt. We're coming to you from Spur, Texas, tiny home capital of the world and home of the Fighting Bulldogs. Anyway, what I want to talk to you all about today are some different books that preppers probably want to have. See, everybody thinks about having guns and pre-prepared food. What we don't consider is that if the grid goes down, Google's probably going with it, and so is YouTube. So our normal ability to research and find out information is probably going to be greatly diminished. So what I did is I made up kind of a list, something we're talking about today, of different topic matters and some books that everybody probably wants to keep around. Now I know if you're planning to bug out, the last thing you want to do is move a library with you. But there are certain books that you can carry that can be kind of encompassing, certain things you can read ahead of time and pick up some information. But there's also just some books you probably want to have along, problems that you know you're going to run into for your specific circumstance. Like I say, I kind of made a list, and I have a few with me. But before I go into the list, one of the things I wanted to mention here is you don't have to go to Barnes & Nobles and buy the most expensive piece of literature on a topic. A lot of the books I got that are here, I got secondhand. They're older. Whether it's a new edition or an old edition, one upside is the book reads the same. And sometimes it's not a bad thing to go with an older book because in a grid down situation, it's probably going to be your best information. Anyway, some of the topics that I kind of came up with are things like gardening. If you're going to have to plan on doing something in your backyard or in the woods, you want to get a book on gardening, but something that has to do with where you're going to be doing it. Here in West Texas, we run into different issues than people would say in the Northeast or in California or Canada. Different growing seasons, different plants that grow better than others, that sort of thing. Anyway, you're going to want to have a couple really good books on gardening. You're also definitely going to want to have some really good books on first aid. One of the things we don't consider is anybody can patch a wound, and a lot of it's basically self-explanatory, it's common sense. But if you get into something a little bit bigger and you don't necessarily have access to medical supplies, think of something like a deep laceration that would require stitches, an injury to one of your animals that you need. You're going to have to do a little bit of vet work at home. If you're going to have antibiotics and that sort of things around, you need to know about them. You need to be able to reference. I mean, it's one thing to say we're all going to have big vials of penicillin, but what's a good dose of penicillin to give somebody my body weight? Kind of things we need to be able to look into and reference. So first aid, medical, dental is probably a good idea to have something handy on. If we don't have dentists, we're going to have to figure some of that out on our own. You're going to want some good books on firearms. Everybody talks about all the guns they're going to have. And nobody is an expert. Nobody has everything memorized on ballistics or what type of round to use for what game or something else. And one of the books I got, especially for those of you who are beginners in this. Now I know some of you memorized every gun possible and read the copy of the shooting Bible every night before you go to bed. But if you're looking for some good basic introductory stuff, you can get a simple book like this one. It's actually a merit badge book the Boy Scouts have on rifle shooting. And we're not sponsored by the Boy Scouts or anything else. I was a Boy Scout when I was a kid. I was an Eagle Scout. But I get no sponsorship from them. However, if there's some topics you want to go into, I strongly encourage you to go to the Boy Scout website for a couple bucks. They have basically beginner's guides to a lot of topics. This one's on rifle shooting. That would be a good resource. I'd get plenty of books. If you're going to have firearms, get some books on them. How to use them, what you can do with them, what you shouldn't do with them. I would recommend that we probably have some books about the weather. You know, we take for granted that we can turn on Channel 9 News and they'll tell us what's going to happen. But the day is going to come when that dude from the Weather Channel is not live in a hurricane making it look like it's windy to tell us how bad it is. You're going to be able to need to diagnose certain things. All right, there's a big storm coming. What kind of clouds are they? Is it likely to bring hail? Is it likely to bring a tornado? The kind of thing we wouldn't necessarily just know because, again, we're not going to have Google or the weather app to go to and tell us what's up. Water is going to be a big issue in a grid down situation, so you're probably going to want some different books on water purification. Again, this probably goes back to where you live. What type of water can you drink? What type can you bathe with? What type can you use for plants or pets or that sort of thing? Different ways to preserve it, purify it, whatever. Amounts you need to cook with or something along those lines. Knowing the water where you are is going to be vitally important. And just getting a simple book on that can go a long way. Food preparation is going to be a big deal. I hear a lot of these guys on videos, they're basically going to live off the land and shoot rabbits and cook them every night over an open fire. Skin them first. But anyway, after a while, it's going to get really old. We're not dogs. We can't eat kibbles and bits every day and be happy about it. So one thing that I recommend everybody get is a cookbook or two. It doesn't have to be a brand new one. I guarantee you, if you go to any book sale at any library anywhere, you're going to have no problem getting cookbooks, because old people give all of their books that nobody else wants to the library. The friends of the library sell them to raise money for the local library. So you can find a treasure trove of cookbooks, and some of the older ones are better. Something on wild game. If you're going to have a backyard chicken or rabbit coop, you really want to know how to cook them. If you're planning to live off wild game, well, you can skin a rabbit or a fish and cook it real easy. But what would the issues be with a feral hog, for example? And a good cookbook that goes into how to cook it, some different spices you can put in so you're not eating the same thing every day is handy. A good food preservation book is probably also going to be something you're going to want to have around. Something with pictures you'll also love. That way you have a ballpark on what it's supposed to look like. Is the biscuit supposed to be that color brown, isn't it? That sort of thing. Those will come in really handy, and you can get those cheap. I'd also probably want a book or two on psychology. In a grid down situation, people are not going to be in a good place emotionally. So with that in mind, a book on psychology or sociology would be handy and tell you how you're reacting, but also how they're going to react and some ways to maybe preempt it. If you're planning on having livestock, you're going to want some literature on hand for them. You may know everything there is to know about raising cows and bunny rabbits in your backyard, but they also may get sick from something fairly common that you haven't dealt with, because we have inoculations now. And that's something to remember. And a good book on whatever you're planning to raise as your food source would be pretty handy. Also, alternate foods. It's real easy to say we're going to raise chickens when we can go to Tractor Supply and get a big old bag of chicken feed for $8.99. When you've got to improvise what you're feeding them, it's really handy to know what type of seeds, plants, that sort of thing they can eat. Now, thankfully, chickens can eat almost anything, but the operative word is almost. Along with the cookbooks and books about your animals, you're going to want something on nutrition. It's a really good idea to have a book on calorie counts, how many you need per day, what type of calories you have. Yes, I know every meal needs to have all 5 food groups, but sometimes we're going to have to get creative with that. We may have to substitute beans for a meat or a certain type of vegetable for fruit because of access and proximity to them. And a book on nutrition that explains what the different fruits or vegetables can do for you or how they work can be worth its weight in gold. Got here on the list a road atlas. Again, I'm not going in any particular order. I pick a road atlas because everybody I know is married to Apple Maps or Google Maps, and they both love and hate them. I don't know anybody who isn't pissed off at Siri for telling them where to go, because they always get them lost. But on the other hand, nobody knows how to use a map. If you're going to try to bug out, you want to have a good road atlas, so you've got backup routes and that sort of thing. We cannot count on the internet working. An all-around general prepper book, they have a few of them out there made by different people. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to go with the Boy Scout Handbook. I would suggest everybody get a copy. It's going to cover, not in depth, but it is going to cover every major issue you would need for some type of self-subsistence living. Camping, fishing, hiking, basic first aid, that sort of thing. It's going to be pretty encompassing. This was mine. I had it when I was in high school. This older version belonged to my uncle. There's not a whole lot of difference in them. But you're going to find a current copy for a few dollars on the Boy Scout website or at a host of bookstores. It's worth ordering a copy, because just going out and grabbing yourself a handbook, if you've got to bug out and get on the road quick, if you had to take one book with you, this is probably a good one. If you're planning on living off-grid for quite a while, you're probably going to want to know how to sew. I didn't actually get a sewing book, which is odd, because my mom, to my right, about 30 feet away, has like 75 books on sewing. But frankly, they're heavy and I didn't want to bring them over here. So anyway, but get a book on sewing, how to not just make clothes, but how to repair them, that sort of thing. It's easy to say we can figure it out with a needle and thread, but some thread's thicker than others. Sometimes you need the right needle. And for the love of God, use a thimble, because poking yourself gets really old. But a book on sewing will come in handy. You probably want a book on auto mechanics. A lot of people these days don't know how to do basic things like change their oil or diagnose what the check engine light means. Check engine light's going off. It means you're in it, and you flip it open in the book for Toyota and it says, oh, something with the airflow. When you pop the hood, do you even know what you're looking at? If a hose is disconnected or something simple like that, if you see a fluid leaking, do you know how to diagnose which fluid it is? And if the grid never goes down, well, you learned a little something about the vehicle that you drive every day. If the grid does go down, you know how to fix it. Because I guarantee you in a grid down situation, you're going to see what you saw in Puerto Rico or with Katrina in New Orleans, or we saw in Houston with Harvey. And that's vehicles having fairly minor problems and people thinking they're crippled and having to walk away from them. A lot of vehicles were totaled out in Harvey because when folks tried to drive out, maybe the engine got a little water or the exhaust got covered and the engine coughed out. They didn't realize that they could restart it and go again, and they left those vehicles there. In a true grid down situation, you're probably going to want to make your vehicle last as long as it can. Even if it's only an extra 8 or 10 miles, doesn't sound like a long way until you have to walk it carrying all your stuff. You probably want a good book on outdoor dangers. It's one of the reasons I recommend something like the Boy Scout Handbook, or I thought I had another one over here, but we have a book on Texas plants, because that's where we are, which are poisonous, which are not. We've got plenty of books around, handbooks on what kind of snake is that. Now, as I say that, some of the people around here seem to think every snake is a rattlesnake, even if it doesn't have rattles, or it's a completely different color, but whatever. And if you don't know, it's better to assume they all are. But if you get bit by one, it's a really good idea to know if you're going to die or not. And I find that really handy for my own, emotional good places. So anyway, get a book on the dangers in your area, plants you can and can't eat, what you might be allergic to, spider bites. Is this one going to kill you? Is it not? If it does, how to treat it. Snakes, that sort of thing. Those can come in real handy. And another aspect that I throw out here is, and this isn't necessarily necessary for survival, but children's books. One thing nobody really considers, be it in a long-term grid down situation, because I don't know, North Korea dropped an EMP or something, or just a hurricane and we're going to be without power for a few days. These days, children especially, they're used to TVs, they're used to tablets, they're used to being able to be entertained in some way whenever they want. And we found a couple times when we went lengthy times without power that we had to get a little creative entertaining children. And having some children's books can go a long way. And you don't need a huge selection. Anybody who's had a 4-year-old around knows you can read the same book every night for 6 months. They don't care. I mean, it can be one of those little floppy paperback ones with the Paw Patrol. They're fine with it. Because even though they saw last night that Marshall saved the baby turtles, they're still on edge tonight. We've got to figure that out. Anyway, a couple children's books that are age appropriate will go a long way for entertaining them. But if it is something more long term, it's also something they can use as a way to teach them to read, because people are going to have to consider doing education at home. Anyway, this is just a small list. I'm really hoping we get some comments here, because I'd like to do a more immersive list on this topic, because it's something I put together because it came up today in a discussion with Travis, talking about what kind of books we'd need if Google didn't exist. Anyway, throw out your 2 cents in the comments, like, subscribe, and I hope I see you next time.